Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new. My name is Jenny, and I wanted to talk to you today about Cromwellathon and Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. We are halfway through the read-a-thon at this stage, and I wanted to share my thoughts on the first half of the book. I have really enjoyed getting into this world over the last few weeks. I think that Hilary Mantel is a master at creating really well-developed characters. So if you love character-driven novels, I would say this is a gem that you should check out. The things that I like the most about it are how well-rounded Thomas Cromwell is as a protagonist. He's someone that you're rooting for. He's someone that you are intrigued by. He's multi-layered. He's surrounded by other characters that are multi-layered. So as someone who is familiar with the story, Henry VIII and his wives, having read biographies of them many years ago, I feel like the overall situations that Mantel decides to focus on are just really fascinating. You are often shown, especially in films, the lives of monarchs through the monarch's eyes, or through their wife's eyes, or through their close companion's eyes. And seeing it through Thomas Cromwell, who is this character who is connected at first to Cardinal Wolsey, who's a very, very powerful man, but in a very different way from the king. And then watching him slowly move from this outer periphery position into this internal position right beside Henry in the first half of this book is fascinating. I love the periods that Mantel has chosen to show. I love the way she has explained his backstory, only dropping into the past when it's relevant to the situation that Thomas Cromwell finds himself in currently. I think that the way she opens the book gives you an immediate sympathy for the character, and his tenacity, his ability to survive, his ability to adapt. I love the way she shows him becoming a man of consequence, becoming someone who educates himself, pulling himself up from nothing to become something. And in a lot of ways, I think it feeds into a mythology of the strength of independence. And if you have strength of character, you can become anything from nothing. You can become something from nothing. You can climb up the ladder. And I think in today's society, we understand that things are not that simple, that there's systemic factors at play that inhibit certain people from climbing a ladder and encourage other people to climb a ladder. So certainly this storyline is reinforcing the fact that Thomas Cromwell came from nothing and is achieving at this stage a lot. But it's a different time, it's a different place, and it is very specific to England and English white men. And so from that perspective, he is able to seize the day, as it were, and make the most of his opportunities. My favorite chapter so far has been The Occult History of Britain. An Occult History of Britain. It's a very long chapter. And there were two things in here that made me mark pages that I wanted to share when I talked about this today. Jason of Old Blues Chapter and Verse, who's hosting this readathon, has gone through each section of the book as we've read each week and read out a few of the passages that he enjoys the most. And I would definitely agree with his interpretation that Mantel's prose is beautiful. She has a way with words that is just a delight to read. And there's many, many beautiful passages. But I wanted to read you one in particular that's on page 93 of this edition, of my edition. And it's in the chapter An Occult History of Britain. And this is just a moment, to me, it illustrates beautifully how well Hilary Mantel can show intimacy between her characters and how she was able to develop this beautiful, meaningful, deep relationship between Thomas Cromwell and his wife Liz in very few pages, because without spoiling anything, Liz and Thomas have very little time in this book together, and every single sentence that he wrote with the two of them in the same space created this beautiful connection that I found very, very compelling. So from this page, "Hush," Liz says. "Listen to the house. At first there is no sound. Then the timbers creak, breathe. In the chimneys, nesting birds shuffle. A breeze blows from the river, faintly shivering the tops of trees. They hear the sleeping breath of children, imagined from other rooms. 'Come to bed,' he says. The king can't say that to his wife, or, with any good effect, to the woman they say he loves." So I just loved that small little passage, and how she's able to differentiate between what Henry, the king, who's supposed to be able to have everything, can have, and what Thomas and Liz can have. That level of intimacy, that level of the simple, beautiful, domestic scene that to me is kind of bliss, and I'm sure other people experience as bliss, so I loved that little section. The other section I wanted to share is just an observation, and this is Hilary Mantel's way of really conveying more than just the general situation of Cardinal Wolsey being slowly removed from his power by other people who are seeking power. It's also her way, and I found in this section, she's trying to lay the groundwork of England itself and trying to establish in our minds what England was like at this time, where these structures stemmed from, so how they developed into what they were in 1527 specifically, and how Wolsey is a tool in some ways of conveying that history. So he's this kind of authoritative, warm, like sympathetic character in some ways, because you feel bad that he's being usurped. But he's also this authoritative person who has all this history. He's kind of like the bard in a sense of what has come before. And that's what he's kind of talking about in this section. I think he's just returned from trying to convince some important people that Henry should be able to divorce Catherine. And I just loved this little section. This is on page 118, again in An Occult History of Britain's chapter. "There cannot be new things in England. There can be old things freshly presented, or new things that pretend to be old. To be trusted, new men must forge themselves an ancient pedigree like Walter's, or enter into the service of ancient families. Don't try to go it alone, or they'll think you're pirates." I just thought that was funny and clever, and just in a small little paragraph describing the general mentality of a place that is so tied to its tradition and its history, and it holds up that tradition and history in such a strong way. And actually, at the time I was reading this section, I was also reading The Crown, watching The Crown on Netflix, the third season of The Crown. And so again, The Crown is reinforcing this whole idea as well. It's this idea of tradition and carrying it on and doing it this certain way over and over and over again to establish some sense of order, and also to establish a sense of what England is and what England is not. And I just love, there can be old things freshly presented, or new things that pretend to be old, but you've always got to work it into a pedigree. You've always got to connect yourself somehow to something important in order to justify anybody treating you with any level of respect within that community. So anyway, yeah, Wolf Hall. It's a really great book, and I find it so intriguing as a story, because I wouldn't say that I'm reading it or absorbing it in the same way that I have other stories of this nature, because of the way Hilary Mantel tells the story, and because of the layers that she puts on everything, because of her way of revealing characters and developing their relationships in this very slow, methodical way that connects these people, and then you are brought back to a person again, and the evolution of Thomas himself is really the most strong driving force of the novel. But also having foreknowledge, also knowing kind of the story, knowing what's going to happen, and all the little references she makes to future calamity that's going to happen. So really enjoying it. I will check in again when I have finished and give you my final thoughts. And until then, I think there's a whole playlist that Jason has created of other people's thoughts on Wolf Hall so far. So I will check in again later, and thank you so much for watching.